makes them more powerful because you start to see these characters as individuals, not just props to tell a story. I think the obvious audience is the people that gravitate towards this story. I think the not so obvious audience is the people that want to see stories translated to musicals.
Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we will be doing a midweek movie review of the new movie, Journey to Bethlehem.
Midweek movies are a great time to take a chance on a movie you might not otherwise see. Check out your local movie theater for midweek bargain days. Some even have movie clubs where you get special pricing, maybe even take your partner out on a date. If you're burned out on the typical selection of movies, this is a great time to take a chance and see a smaller budget movie. In this case, a live-action Christmas musical, just in time for the holidays. Rebecca, tell us about Journey to Bethlehem.
Mary doesn't want to be wed to a man she hardly knows when the angel Gabriel informs her that she is to give birth to the King of Kings to save humanity. With enemies pursuing her soon-to-be family, Mary must choose. Is her faith something she lives by or runs from?
Rebecca, we were excited about seeing this movie, and I know you really loved the production value of this movie.
I was really pleasantly surprised how much thought went into the production. I was pointing out little symbols, little costume touches to Mom. It was just really felt like they took the time to make this a world that felt hyper-realized because it's a musical.
It is.
Spoiler alert, there is a lot of singing in this.
Mary, 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 there's something you do.
And some dancing to go with the music.
Dreams are coming true.
But it also felt like kind of like one of those golden age Hollywood musicals where it just felt just draped in texture and fabric.
An angel came to me.
It's hard to have faith.
It's hard to believe.
And pretty decent lighting. I mean, I was impressed nothing caught on fire.
Yeah, no bushes. Although
we were betting, right?
we were betting the bush behind would catch on fire. No bushes were harmed in the making of this movie that we are aware of. I agree with that. The lighting was great, and you were talking about the colorization, and I like the comparison that it feels like an old, like 20s, 30s movie.
The music doesn't feel old, but what I like is you can feel the characters' emotions through the musical compositions that are scattered throughout this movie. There's little touches here and there that I really like to see that an otherwise straight-laced retelling of the Christmas story wouldn't even go there.
I laughed when you talked about the music feeling modern. One of the members of our team me, and we talked about it later, and the comments were it felt very modern. The music felt very modern.
There are too many questions, too little time.
Although it definitely told the story that if you're familiar with the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus, it followed that very closely.
I also like that the music also added the opportunity for some humor. For this, there's one scene with the Magi that's definitely played for laughs.
Why would I help find a new king in my kingdom? Well, when you put it that way.
Perhaps we should go.
What is the
But it also tells you a lot about how the other characters are perceiving them as well.
And there was humor to it. And that surprised me.
Pig? Okay, whoa.
And it wasn't all cheeseball humor, too.
No. And I laughed. It felt very respectful and very reverent humor. It did. It didn't feel over the line to the point where if you're religious or if this is a sacred story, it wouldn't feel offensive. At least I can say, speaking for myself, I didn't feel offended by the story.
There's one joke that they got in there. I was really surprised that they managed to sneak that past the radar.
I would agree with that. But obviously no language, nothing overly obnoxious. I would say the wise men, I know you and I had laughed about at one point, they were a little goofier and not so reverent and deep and intense. They felt kind of like wise guys. And at one point they made even the joke. They're like, oh, we're kind of wise guys. And I'm like, They kind of feel like they are a bit.
This is a film that knows its audience and pokes accordingly.
You still marry me, Joseph?
I do. I will. Yes, of course.
I would agree. I think there's a line and they knew where the line is. Comment below if you've seen the movie. Maybe there was something that we missed or something that interrupted the story for you or became something other than this is a great retelling of the story.
And I can tell you were so excited about this movie, and I kind of caught the bug a little bit, but to see the movie actually explode into something that was worth watching was really nice to see.
Oh, it was great. And I believe out of the gate, it was good and compelling. Her family, Mary's family, her dad, definitely a standout. I enjoyed him a lot.
Tell Mary we are ready. The music, play.
Mom, the sisters.
Your father has always known you are special. Nothing will change that, Mary.
I think the part that I liked is it wasn't only Mary's story. It was Mary's family story. Joseph's family. It really talked about the impact that it had on so many different individuals that played a role in this.
That's the one thing I was really enjoying was that there are layers to a lot of these characters. I can only think of 2 characters that kind of got shunted, but they were present in several big moments as well. So they didn't feel too left out.
There was a great line in the trailer, and it didn't really resonate until we actually saw the movie, and Mary pulls Joseph aside when they're fleeing. And she said, I'm not the only one chosen for this, meaning he was chosen for this.
I'm not the only one who was chosen for this.
And I so appreciated that because we hear Mary's perspective, and obviously there's a lot of singing and dancing around Mary.
Married. It's about to be the best day of your life.
But I love the fact that Joseph was such an equal part of this.
You have a choice. You can say you believe me and that you love me.
Because sometimes I think it's easy to forget his whole life was turned upside down and the weight and the responsibility he felt. And he's such a young man, and you literally see him mature over the course of this movie.
I think that was really sweet because there's a perspective that Joseph is facing as well, meaning his family is ostracizing him.
I appreciated that, to see so many different levels in Antonio Banderas's King Herod.
He's quite a campy, flamboyant King Herod.
It's good to be king. Everyone wants my crown. I won the mother found. Don't have to be good.
Well, and he really comes across crazy and paranoid, which historically that's the account of him.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of showcasing his paranoia and what a crisis that becomes for the other characters. It's not just, he's crazy, he's going to cut off our heads. It's like, oh, he's actually going to do bad things and we don't want this to happen.
I think his character really brings to life the scriptures that many people have read, the historical accounts that many people know. It's funny, I've never read the passages thinking of Antonio Banderas. However, now I think I may go, oh wow, there's a voice to that. There's a visual for that.
There's all these other little historical winks and nods that if you look beyond the biblical text, like some of the historical sources, that it kind of points to. So I thought that was kind of neat too.
The details were really good. I know we talked about the dialogue, which is hilarious because we love movies. However, there are movies that I really enjoy that aren't heavily saturated with dialogue. And this movie was not heavily saturated. However, it was very true to the source material. In the description, I know you and I had talked about, I said it gave the movie time to breathe. You hear the story, you hear the dialogue, you see what's happening, and You just breathe and you watch it and you start to feel it.
The other thing I like is sometimes musicals, I feel like, don't put enough space between the dialogue and the music. It didn't feel like every other minute there's another song coming along.
I would so agree with that, because a number of musicals we know and love. However, I that's such a great statement, because there were several numbers that were accurate. If you're going to tell the story, you can tell it in song, and they did. But it is, as you said, it wasn't as if people can't talk, they can only sing. And some musicals have that feel to it.
Yeah, I think the music is definitely time for impact with as much care as the dialogue in this movie.
Do we have any questions from the box?
Many people know the story of the birth of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. Do you believe this movie adds any information or deepens the story in a way that maybe some people wouldn't know?
There's one song, I think it's probably my favorite song in this movie. And it's about Joseph wrestling with his conflicting feelings for Mary. On one hand, he wants desperately to believe her. On another hand, he feels like there is no choice but to not believe her. And I thought that was a beautiful touch to show how exactly he was wrestling with his feelings. In the text, they talk about how Joseph was going to quietly break off the engagement, spare Mary the embarrassment. But it adds so much depth to this decision that he wants to make.
And I know exactly what you're talking about, because you did that to me when it was playing, and it was beautiful. This movie was shot so beautifully, and I think to me that's what adds to it. Meaning, in my mind, I can visualize all sorts of things, but to have a song attached to it, to have a voice attached to it, and the actors and actresses really felt very complete and very strong. And I like that added dimension. They, at one point, had talked about, this is what Mary had thought her life would be, and Joseph had said, this is what I thought my life would be, not marrying young to someone that I barely know.
And it's not a whining song. There's a few musicals we know that we like that involve this scenario, but it's almost like a whiny, not an I want song. I think the fact that they chose to make it an I want song makes it more powerful, because you start to see these characters as individuals, not just props to tell a story.
And there was a lot of chemistry between the families, Mary and Joseph. I actually like the chemistry between the two of them.
Yeah, I think this movie definitely sells that bit quite nicely, because otherwise you just feel like, oh, we just have to be sharing a scene together. We just have to be singing together to sell it long enough. And it's like, no, these are characters that are coming together, that are growing together. And I like that they affirm that with not only the storytelling choices they made, but also the casting.
Do we have any other questions from the box?
This movie's billed as a musical. Do you think it was successful in that completely? Or was it a bait and switch?
It's definitely a musical. It's billed as a musical, it sets out as a musical, and it succeeds as a musical for me.
Agree.
It's a little bit more talk heavy than your average musical, but it works.
I would agree with that. And as you and I were saying, that actually, in our estimation, worked better in some ways.
But that's our personal taste as well, too.
Correct. Some people like music, heavy dialogue. If you like heavy dialogue, this may not be the movie for you.
It's definitely I would say a 60-40, 60% music, 40% dialogue.
Okay, I'll go with that. Do we have any other questions from the box?
Based on the subject matter, who do you think would like the movie? Do you think they need to have a spiritual background in order to enjoy it, or can they just walk in and enjoy it?
I think the obvious audience is the people that gravitate towards this story. I think the not so obvious audience is the people that want to see stories translated to musicals, not just we're in it for a musical. It's how do we translate this story into a musical like format? And I think sometimes that's tough to do, but there is an audience for it.
I appreciate that you don't necessarily have to have that spiritual background to enjoy the movie. It puts the dots close enough where you can follow it and understand it. And I think the spiritual component obviously adds a greater depth to it. Angels are coming down and talking. I think if you have that spiritual underpinning, you're not necessarily going to say, oh, that's crazy.
Well, it's more impactful for you because you understand the gravity of the situation.
Correct. And you know where it's going and it impacts your entire life. And faith is a part that impacts many people's lives. I think that enriches it. However, I think the story can be told from either a historical perspective, because there are documentation that says outside of the spiritual canons and things that will say, hey, this is what had happened. But even then, I think it just had a nice feel to it.
It was very smooth. I didn't feel like the movie had these points where it felt like they're running through draft after draft, trying to figure out how are we going to do this. It felt very cohesive.
It did. It had a very nice tone to it, just very calming, and I appreciated that. It didn't feel heavy-handed. It didn't feel, like you said, rushed. And there's something about that, to be able to have a proper pacing movie. Rebecca, it's that time of the show where we have 5 moths with wings this time.
Ooh.
5 angel moths. On a scale 1 to 5 moths, what would you give this movie?
3 angel moths for the holiday season.
3 angel moths for the holidays. And number 1 reason?
It's not as long as if I would have liked. There's a few characters I feel like got minimized, and I think they could have done more with them.
And that's the Mary sisters, or?
Mary sisters, and I wish they would have done a little bit more with Elizabeth.
I was thinking that too. Okay, yeah, I get that.
But other than that, it's a pretty cohesive and complete movie.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean you should tune it out.
Who do you think would enjoy this movie?
I think the Messianic spiritual community is definitely going to enjoy this movie.
Sure, I agreed.
But I think the wider musical community might have something to appreciate from this. I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar isn't just a superstar with one kind of audience.
That is true. And I wouldn't say just the Messianic Jews. I would say Christians and people of faith, right? Protestants, Catholics. I think there is definitely an audience that would enjoy that. And as you said, more the obvious audience. However, I think the universal audience could enjoy it also for the holidays. All right. 5 angel moths decide to come back and see me now.
Ooh.
I would say for me, it's a 3 and a wing. It's for the reasons you said, very positive. I really enjoyed it. I just think it's, understanding that a 3 is above average, I would say it's above average and then some. It's leaning closer toward a 4. However, I would say a 3 just because of the length. Like you said, there's some of the individuals, more character development would have enriched the story. There were a few things that were a bit silly with the wise men, although I enjoyed them. There was a few parts that took me a little bit away from the story. I enjoyed it. However, if they're trying to tell a straight, complete story, it might be distracting. And I think to some in our cinema community may go, well, I don't know if I can visualize Antonio Banderas's, King Batty over there.
King Batty. There's a meme.
King Batty. Thanks for joining us for this midweek review. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for a review of the new movies, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and also Trolls Band Together. Then come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark, meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this midweek review, you might click the link to check out our review of The Marvels, or click the other link to watch last week's show where we reviewed The Holdovers.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.